Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm so happy to have each and every one of you back here today. And we've also got a new guest here. We've got Mary Stange, is the owner of Ponte Travels. Mary, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Welcome.
Hey, Jason. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I look forward to kind of, digging into your background a little bit. Let's see if we can bring out some childhood memories, hopefully not too traumatic.
Let's not do that.
But I've noticed no, there's no crying in baseball, right? So, and hopefully this conversation will bring back some good memories for you. Because I have found that most of the folks that I've chatted with have kind of an interesting moment in their life or somebody in their life that kind of inspired them to go do something a little different than what the rest of the world seems to be doing. And so let's start with that. Let's go back as far as you want to go back, and what caused this all to happen for you, and what's your story? How did you get from where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a great origin story kind of a question, right? Like what made you who you are? What villain was the villain of your story kind of thing? There are no villains in my story, but no, I guess it started for me when I was a kid. My dad eventually, he was a merchant marine, and so he traveled a lot. He'd go for these 3-month jobs from place to place, and he always sent back trinkets and postcards and the like. And so from an early age, I feel like that kind of made it like my bubble was expanded from an early age, right? Like there are other places out there. There are all these amazing other worlds that is not my world. So that was kind of like the first little inception into travel for me. Fast forward several years, and I had the opportunity to travel abroad in college. So many of us do. And I chose to go to a program in Limerick, Ireland. And it seems like, okay, well, it's, how different is that really from a lot of US education? But it was a really eye-opening experience for me, in the terms of living in a new country and operating in a new country. More than just the tourism part of it. It was going grocery shopping. It was, finding a hairdresser. It was the little things that made living in a place. And so that really opened my eyes, right? It kind of showed me that the world is so much bigger. But we all do the same things. We all go to the dentist, and we all bring our kids to daycare, and we all do these mundane things that connects us through humanity, right? And so that was I think the first real big transformational moment in travel for me. After that, fast forward a few more years, I got commissioned into the Navy as an officer, and went on a couple of deployments, and got to do that whole see the world thing that they promise you, and that was really cool too. We got to pull into a lot of really cool places that I probably would never have visited otherwise, and then you got to see these little pockets of the world, and I feel like from there I was just hooked. I couldn't stay in one place after that.
I get that. I can relate to several of the things you shared there. And I'm curious, let's go back to when you were younger, before you went to Ireland. Had you had the opportunity to travel with your father as well on some of these trips, or were you pretty much in one place, or what did that look like?
Yeah, no, that trip to Ireland was my first trip out of the country. So we only did, US travel up to that point, but that was my first time actually.
But you did US travel.
Yeah, we
But
did
you
U.S.
did some
travel.
U.S.
We
travel
did kind
and,
of, visit
okay.
family and other things, but, it wasn't like the larger sense of it.
Right. And I suspect, though, that travel in the U.S. at an earlier age had an impact. Because one of the things I heard you say was, I went off to study abroad in college, like many of us do. And you know what popped into my head when you said that is there's many more of us that don't. Right. So it's like, yeah, many of us in the travel business, I have heard that in quite a few of the conversations that I have on a daily basis. But at the same time, that's not such a small deal. That's not like, yeah, I got up and made a sandwich. I mean, you left the country, especially the fact that it was the first time you left the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially in the US, but it's a big country. Sometimes we have a tendency to think we've got plenty of things to see here in the US. Why do I need to go to Ireland? Or, I was interviewing someone today that did, a year abroad in Tasmania, in Australia. But it takes something special for somebody to actually want to do that and do it, because frankly, there's a lot of people that maybe they grow up in Vermont and it's like, and they go away to school in New York for a semester. It's like a kind of big deal. And I'm not knocking that. I mean, it's just,
sure.
This business attracts a different mindset.
That's what you're talking about. Like it's about the perspective of how far things really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might not have gone to Ireland had you not, like you said, your father was traveling, opened you up to ideas. You went to places with the family. So that's pretty cool. And I also think this conversation is unique because I've had quite a few now, and you've got a military background. I do as well. And someone I was speaking with the other day, I mentioned my military background. They said, oh, I don't know. I know hardly anybody in the adventure travel business that has any sort of military background. And I was like, oh, wow. It's interesting because it doesn't come up very much in these conversations. And I'm curious. Well, I know I joined the Army because I thought I was going to get to go travel and see places and have amazing experiences. Was that part of it with you in the Navy as well? Was the drive to travel the thing, or were you like a lot of people that just like, I want to get my college paid for, I want to pay off my school loans?
I can't say that travel was the underlying motivation to do what I did. From an early age, I think the opportunity to fly an airplane was the thing that was dragging me towards the Navy. And then, the further along we got down the line, the paying for college thing was a pretty sweet deal. So I couldn't pass that up. And so it's, they paid for my college and let me fly an airplane. And so it's, here, really couldn't say no to that.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's super cool. That was the other part of the Army was I wanted to be a, helicopter pilot, and my recruiter was really good. It's like, oh yeah, you should just enlist, drop out of school, go enlist. You're a smart guy. You've got good test scores. And then you just fill out some paperwork and they'll send you to flight school. Well,
yeah, they dangle that in front of you, come fly an airplane.
Yeah. I get that. So let's discuss that. Because it's a unique opportunity. I'm fascinated by it. So you were commissioned. So did you do ROTC or what did?
Yeah. So I did an ROTC program through Jacksonville University. And then, commissioned as an ensign in the Navy when I graduated, like the day I graduated. And then went off to flight school in Pensacola shortly thereafter. I spent 18 months in basic flight school, going through the different schools that they have you go through there, different selection processes of, do you go to this, do you go to that? And then that further splits, do you go to this, do you go to that? And eventually I got selected for the EA-6B Prowler, which the Navy does not even fly anymore. So that's kind of cool. So I then
you said the A86
Prowler, EA-6B Prowler.
Okay, so what kind of so for those of us that have no clue what that means, what kind of airplane is that?
It's the follow-on to the A6. I feel like everybody's really familiar with the A6 Intruder. That's the follow-on to that. Mm-hmm. So it's the electronic attack platform with the jammers on the bottom, and it's meant to do radar and comms jamming and that kind of stuff. And so instead of a two-seater, it's actually four. So you have two in the front and two in the back. And it's a shipboard jet. So we did a lot of carrier ops, and like I said, my two deployments were carrier based. So after Pensacola, I went up to Whidbey Island in Washington, And that's where that's where all the prowlers were based when they were active. And I did the rest of my training up there on the jet. And then my 3 years of squadron time was up there as well.
So you've landed an airplane on an aircraft carrier.
To be fair, I wasn't the pilot, the stick and rudder. I was the navigator, weapons systems officer, talking on the radios and managing all the systems and doing all the actual purpose that the jet is there to do. So, they were just getting us from point A to point B.
So you were doing all the work.
I was going doing the job. Yeah.
That is, Mary, that is super cool. That's it's kind of a big deal. What did your parents think of all this?
Oh my goodness. I don't even want to ask my mom what she thought of this. I feel like it's
Oh, you didn't ask that? Mom, I don't want to hear it.
Just be supportive and don't tell me what you really think.
Yeah. My mom, I remember my mom cried the conversation I had with her. Mom, I just got back from the recruiter. I joined the Army. I'm going to go be an Army Ranger, and then I'm going to be a helicopter pilot because they told me I could do that. Yeah, it wasn't quite what she had in mind. She was a research scientist and she had other plans for me, but
funny.
Yeah. So, all right, that's cool. And wow, that's just, I think I could ask you so many questions about that. I'm just fascinated by that. But it's your story, so I'll let you continue. So you spent 3 years, you said, in Washington?
Yeah, 3 years
in the squadron.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you did some travel. You mentioned that. So what was the next step that got you? Oh, I think I'm going to be a tour operator and work in the travel business and do all this stuff. So what happened then?
Yeah, there are definitely a few steps between the two moments, the two milestones in my life. So let's back up. So yeah, when at that point, my new husband at the time, who was also in the Navy, he was a submarine officer. And, it's a whole different podcast story. We can go with that. We got to talk and we're like, the way that our career trajectories were going, there wasn't ever going to be a time in our careers. If we both stayed in, if we both kept doing what we were going to do, there was never going to be a time where we were going to overlap. And that just wasn't acceptable for us.
Wait, you mean the submarine guy and the airplane gal that doesn't match very well?
No, we just crossed. we were never going to end up in the same spot, right? And that just wasn't going to fly for us. We were really prioritizing us over a career, and so we devised this super awesome high speed plan where he would separate from the Navy and pursue the Foreign Service of the State Department. And I remember that conversation quite well because he was a little hesitant. He brought this idea to the table. It's like, what do you feel? How do you feel about maybe living overseas? How do you want to? Would you be okay with that? I don't even think I don't let him end the sentence. I was like, yes, 100% yes. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's pick up everything. We'll sell it all. Let's go.
Were you, Mary? Yeah. Were you willing to just, because I don't know how it works with the Foreign Service and State Department, but were you going into it with the attitude of wherever they send us is fine, or yes, I'll do it if it's Europe or if it's this or if it's that, but I won't go to, or were you just completely open?
Wherever they send me is fine. Everywhere that they decide to put us is going to be an adventure. I'm going to find happiness no matter where we are on the globe. And there's going to be something fascinating about anywhere we go. I mean, will there be cons to places? So, yeah, there will be. But, we kind of had this really wide-eyed view of the world that, we haven't heard of half of these places on this list, but their possibilities, and how exciting is that when you can just literally be dropped in the middle of any country. I mean, obviously, where you're going beforehand, but where they can just tell you where you're going to go and that's it. You're just going to go live there for a couple of years. That happened to us essentially. Well, we knew where we were going before we got there. It wasn't a total surprise, but, he goes through his first initial training and we get the list of possibilities of, there's 50 different places on the list. And, the first tour is often a consular tour, right? Working in the visa office and processing visas and dues and American citizen services and all that. So there are a lot of Mexico on there, a lot of China, a lot of these ones that generate a lot of consular traffic. But there was also a few on there that I've never heard of. Yerevan, Armenia being one of them. And so, we did our research, we did our due diligence. I did flight and logistics planning in the Navy that I was like, I gotta know everything. And the more we looked into it, the more we're like, yes, this is cool. It's unheard of. It's, in the middle of the Caucasus. It has this really fascinating history and culture. And, it's why not? Why not us? Why not now? Why not there? And so we got lucky enough to get that for his first pick. And, I guess it was November of 2015. We find ourselves, it's cold, it's winter, it's the middle of the night. Landing in Yerevan with, then I had a 1.5-year-old son, like, okay, we're here now. This is life in post-Soviet Armenia.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
that is so cool.
It's definitely an adventure. Because,
what was the biggest shock and surprise? What was the hardest thing for you to deal with on that first trip? I say first trip, but it's more than just a trip. So just curious what came up for you.
Right. Yeah. I feel like even through we were there for 2 years. And I feel like even for those full 2 years, there was always that like little sense of mysticism about the place. Like there's always so much that I'm not going to know about this place, that I'm not going to know about the culture, these little microcultures that you find everywhere, right? From little coffee houses to you go out to, a different town and you find a restaurant out there and that has its own little microculture. And everything's just so new and so fascinating. And I think if there was anything I really struggled with, because I could talk all day about how wonderful travel is and how great it was, but I feel like if there's anything I was really struggling with, it was the kind of constant barrier that there is to pretty mundane things. Grocery shopping, for example. You feel like it's something that we all take for granted. You just go, you buy a rotisserie chicken and a can of beans, and then you go home and you make dinner. I found that, going to the grocery store, not only was nothing in English, not even like the signs that were in, written Armenian, which is not even doesn't even use the same alphabet. So you're trying to interpret like, okay, is this tomato paste? Is it tomato sauce? Is it tomato? What is this? Like, what is it?
Or is it even tomato?
Or is it even tomato, right? Is it something else completely? Or, you go to the butcher's counter and it's literally just a big counter of stuff I can't decipher. And there's always, does this make sense? Like there's always that little bit of a barrier with everything, that every mundane thing that you needed to do. Getting an oil change, for example, in our car, like going and doing that was its own set of challenges. But I feel like it is those mundane things that kind of makes it a complete experience.
Yeah. It's constant stimulation, even if it's just trying to figure things out. I've been traveling the last 2.5 years, and just yesterday it was a half-day ordeal trying to figure out how to get my laundry done, because and ironically I'm in Armenia, Colombia right now.
Oh, you are?
So yeah.
Stop.
So, and I knew Armenia was going to come up in this conversation, and I was like, but it was the same thing. I spent half a day trying to figure out which bus do I get on, and my Spanish is getting better, and then I get to the first place that I found on Google, and they only really do dry cleaning. So she started counting my socks to try, I asked her how much it was going to be, and she started pulling everything out, counting it. And she got to where it was $25 and only half the bag had been emptied. And I was like, this isn't going to, so anyway, so yeah, I get the mundane things.
Funny. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yep. Yeah. It's the mundane thing. It's like those little interactions that everything's just a little bit more difficult, but you run into these really, really funny scenarios. Oh my gosh. You're in Armenia, Colombia.
Have you been?
Colombia was our second post after Armenia.
Well, I thought I saw that in your bio. So I actually, when I read your bio, I saw Armenia, Colombia. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So yeah. Okay. So tell us whatever else you want to tell us about Armenia, and then we'll chat about Colombia.
I feel like Yerevan, Armenia, was a really great introduction to this life, right? And I feel like we were also at this position where, we had a young family, we had young kids. We were at this point, it's like we threw ourselves into the deep end of the swimming pool with choosing Yerevan, Armenia as our very first place to go to live, like to truly live outside of the US. And it was kind of this question of, would we do it again? Where else do we want to go? Like, is this something that's for us, or we can go back home, or we can keep going? there was no way in hell we were going to go back home. We're like, no, give us another. Let's do it again. Let's rev up and do it again. And yeah, so again, he got another list, and Bogota, Colombia came up on that list, and we were like, how fascinating would that be to go live in Colombia for 2 years? And yeah, that was our second place we went. Again, we were in Bogota, which is a much bigger city than Armenia, Colombia, but that was completely different world. Big city, just a whole different vibe than the Caucasus, but no less.
So were both your family, his family, everybody still supportive when you said we're going to Bogota?
I think so.
Yeah.
Not that they would tell us to our face, at least.
But we've already determined you don't ask your mom what she thinks. So
I don't. I've stopped asking about opinions.
Well, I know my parents were not so happy. Again, I think my mom cried again when I said I'm selling all my stuff and I bought a one-way ticket to Colombia. But so so you were in Bogota for 2 years?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were in Bogota for another 2 years. Yeah. Were
you able to travel around either both Armenia and Colombia? Did you have the time and the ability to go travel around, or because I've got in my head sometimes maybe, okay, you're a U.S. government employee. I mean, I've read the State Department warnings about Colombia, and it's like you shouldn't go anywhere, shouldn't do anything. So I'm imagining, and I remember when I was in the Army, like before the weekend, they'd give you, don't go to the such and such club because you're going to get in trouble. And so I'm imagining like they don't even want you to leave town. Was that your experience?
Well, in Armenia,
if you can talk about it.
The safety. Yeah, right. In Armenia, it wasn't necessarily the safety issue, right? As a country, it was extremely safe. And I think the biggest barrier to travel in Armenia was probably just infrastructure and language. It wasn't really easy to drive around the rest of the country, without a 4x4 vehicle and without a sat phone. And so it did make travel inside of Armenia kind of hard. I think we did a pretty good job of getting around to see a lot of the other smaller places. And we drove up to Tbilisi a couple of times, and that was a really fun trip. Up in Georgia. So that was fun. But I thought that we did a much better job in Colombia doing regional travel. But the funny thing about Colombia was that, again, we were there for 2 years. I think we were traveling pretty regularly, at least once a month we were going to do a weekend trip somewhere. And we never left the country. We spent 2 years of traveling just inside of Colombia because it's so huge. And there's so many different little towns to see. And then, okay, we go to Medellin, but then what about all the little towns that shoot off of Medellin? And so it was, you feel, I had these grand ideas like, oh, we're going to South America. I'm going to get to see Rio and I'm going to get to see Machu Picchu. And no, I didn't even leave the country.
You're right, though. it is one of the most biologically diverse or ecologically diverse countries in the world. And along with that, the diversity of ecology and climatic zones and all this, it gives you a diversity of culture. So yeah, you're in Colombia, but if you're in Colombia and Santa Marta or Cartagena is a totally different experience than if you're in the coffee region where I'm at right now, or even the differences between Medellin and Bogota. They're the two largest cities in the country. They're not geographically that far from each other. I mean, it takes a long time to get there if you're in a bus or, because of the mountains and stuff. But it's just so interesting
how each 40-minute flight. It's really close.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at it on the map and I'm sure like if you're getting ready to go there, you've never been there and you're like, oh, look how close we can go from Bogota to Quito or Peru or all these things. Yeah. But there's so many things to see in Colombia. And I don't know if it's like me, I bought the one-way ticket here, but I thought I'd spend a month in Colombia and then I'd go to Ecuador, probably Peru. I'd been to several of the other countries in South America. And I just underestimated how much I was going to fall in love with the Colombian people and the culture. And it's like, okay, I still haven't been to Ecuador. 2.5 years later, I haven't even made it to Ecuador. I've left a few times.
See?
Yeah, I get it. I've left a few times because I had to, because I was on a tourist, I could only stay for 6 months. So I, took a break and went to Southeast Asia, took a break and went to Mexico. And I've been back to the States a couple of times, but I just keep coming back because it feels like home. And there's still so many, it actually is down to the neighborhood. I mean, because even if you look at Medellin or Bogota, you know, like the neighborhoods are different. You can, you know,
just
hop on a city.
Streets.
Yeah. Hop on a city bus or walk. You know, you can walk into a totally different neighborhood that, man, I think I do the Airbnb thing, and I've stayed in 7 or 8 of the distinct barrios in Medellin. And it's like, if I don't get bored with one, but I'm like, I should go travel, and I end up on the other side of town. And I feel like I'm in a totally different world. But, you know, so I get that completely. And then, okay, so you were in Colombia, and then did you decide to stay on and do another one, or what happened after that?
Yeah, actually we did. So we were, let's see, we were scheduled to leave Colombia the summer of 2020. And let's see, at the time, my son, my oldest, was in kindergarten. And then, you know, we had a daughter by then as well. So she was in pre-4. And then, you know, that wonderful world event happened in February or March of 2020. And we all became locked down in our tiny little apartment for the next 3 months. And
Wow.
Yeah, it was really quite interesting, right? Because it was one of those times where we were able to, I think, connect more with people again through Zoom, through other means, right? So, yeah. How are you doing on your side of the world? What are you doing over here? Like, what's life like over there? I feel like we had probably one of the strictest quarantine situations in Bogota during the time, where, you know, we were in a high-rise apartment, and we literally couldn't leave the door to our apartment. We couldn't use the facilities in our apartment. We couldn't slide the door to our apartment. It was a lot to be. Again, I'm telling this to the world, who I'm sure everybody had very similar experiences. But it's a lot to be, you know, stuck inside of an apartment with 2 kids under 5 and your spouse who's always at work. So that was a bit of a weird time.
It's interesting because I spent most of COVID in the States in Arizona. I came here when I came to Colombia. People were still wearing masks in some of the neighborhoods, which was bizarre. But the stories I'd heard from the people that, you know, had been here through it, I think Colombia was not one of the more pleasant places to be, because everything that's cool about Colombia is outside your apartment. Right. I mean, the whole benefit to being in Colombia for me is to walk out on the streets and to go to the panaderias or to go out and socialize. And when you're locked, and the apartments are small and they're not always necessarily the most comfortable. And in your situation, well, I was working in Arizona. I was working in real estate in Arizona when it all came down, and we were still able to figure out ways to help people buy and sell homes, which blows my mind. But we'd have the people that, hey, we're stuck at home. We've got this little apartment we want to buy now because we're driving each other crazy. So at least they could move. You know, at least it made sense that, okay, we can move into a bigger house. We can go stay with family because, you know, there were workarounds and all that. But when you are in a country without family, that you were already planning to leave in a few months. So going out and buying a bigger house or finding a bigger apartment, you know, even if you could do it,
we had 3 months left, and we're like, you know what, we're just gonna suck it up. We're gonna, you know, we're gonna order in beers and charcuterie as often as we can and sit on the balcony and just try to survive.
Yeah. So they've got a few services here. They've got one called Rappi, that you can order pretty much anything you want, and they bring it to you very quickly. Was that fully active during COVID?
It was, yeah. Rappi, I think, set the standard for delivery for me. It spoiled me for the rest of my life. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like anything you want, they will go and do for you. They will buy it. Even if it's not like a store on the app, you will go, they will buy it, and then they will come back and take care of it for you. It's fantastic. But yeah, they were up and running. And that's, I mean, we had to use them a lot. We had to lean on them a lot because, you know, it's things like grocery shopping got really hard.
Yeah, it's weird. And I suspect that they were really able to refine their services during that time, because by the time I got here, I was blown away. I was staying at a guest house, and this guy's like, he gets on his phone, orders a pack of cigarettes, a bottle of rum, some probably antibiotics. I mean, it was just like literally whatever you want. And I think you can even do money.
There in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think you can do money exchange. I think you can say, hey, bring me some pesos for dollars. I mean, it was crazy. And it was so quick. It was like by the time he got done explaining what this is all about, there was some guy down below, beeping his horn on the motorcycle, like, hey, I'm here. And it was like, it was really, really weird. Yeah. So
they really perfected delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you can't get alcohol delivered in the States. I don't think, still to this day, I don't think you can have somebody bring you a bottle of rum on the back of a motorcycle. So, but anyway, not that that's my thing. It may or may not be my thing, but we can change the subject now. All right. So you were here. So the last few months you were here, you couldn't really enjoy it. And then what happened?
Right. Yeah. So, I think we got really lucky though, because we were able to do so much on the front end. We really front loaded a lot of our Colombian experiences that, by the end of the 2 years in our last 3 months, we're like, okay, there's nothing I feel like we're missing out on. We're just, we're a little cramped, but I think we're ready to make that. And so the next step after that was Cyprus. Our next posting after that was in Nicosia, Cyprus. And so we went back to the States for a few weeks they make you do like a home leave period. And then we arrived in Nicosia in August of 2020.
All right. Very cool. And what were the highlights of that trip, or what do you want to share with our listeners about Cyprus? Because that's a place probably a lot of them have not been. I haven't.
Yeah. Again, it was one of those places where I probably would never have gone if we didn't get posted there. And it's such a fascinating place. Obviously politically, it's fascinating. With it being a split island still, but it's just this little haven in the Mediterranean that I think does not get nearly enough love or appreciation. Just for its scenic landscape. I think it has some of the best beaches in Europe, but just its accessibility too. It's part of the EU, so it's connected to the EU. It's accessible to the east as well. We were there for 3 years. And so it was really easy living for 3 years after being in Armenia and Colombia.
I'm curious. So you said 3 years and the other sounded like they were 2-year posts. Was this a 3-year post or did you just stay on?
This was a 3-year post. And there were like some HR reasons for that we don't have to get into, but yeah.
Okay. I was just curious if it was, we love it so much. We'll stay a little longer, but you're not in Cyprus. So that you went to Cyprus when?
2020. So and then we just left.
Okay. So it's
last summer.
Right. So where are you now?
Now we're in Maryland. We're in sunny Chesapeake, Maryland. It's not quite as adventurous as all that, but.
I'm able to see your face. Our listeners can't see your face and we're in Maryland. And I don't know if we want to go that direction or if we should start talking now about your travel business, but what's in Maryland besides you?
No, because we haven't talked about that at all yet. So let's talk about Ponte.
All right. This is good timing. So we don't need to know why you're in Maryland or what your favorite thing about Maryland is. Maryland is a beautiful place. I love crab cakes. And actually I have some very fond memories. So now, I want to know, you're traveling, you're living in 3 different very cool places. When did the travel business get started? How did you start that? How did that all fit in?
Yeah. So it was actually, I think like late 2019. My husband and I were in Salento in Colombia, on a trip there to Valley de Cocras. And, he was having a really great time. And there was one investment thing he was following that was talking about, buying business as an investment piece. And so he's just searching for something completely different. And all of a sudden this travel business comes up as one of the ones that are available, for our purchase. And we're just like, again, that's interesting. Let's learn more about that. And so we started this conversation with the owners of the company then. And it all just fit. It was one of those situations where their philosophy to travel completely matched up with mine. Their size completely matched up with what I would want. And it was just one of those opportunities that I knew was never going to come around again. And when I got to the point where I was sitting,
and this was
late 2019.
And this was 2019, which was travel markets going hot and crazy. And what a great time to buy a travel business, right? So when did you actually sign the papers?
Well, we were going through the sale, February, March. And again, there's this little thing that's happening. And we thought, I wonder if that's going to affect us. I wonder if this is going to affect anything. And it got to a point. I mean, we all got to that point where it's like, okay, do we keep going? Do we keep going? Do we pull out? Right? Do we say, okay, this was fun, but we had the opportunity to stop and be like, okay, we can stop now if we really don't want this, or we can plan for it. We could say, okay, look, we know that the travel industry is going to tank for a couple of years. We know that, let's just have the assumption that we're not going to have any income for a year and a half at the minimum, right? Let's build it into our business plan now so that we're not surprised by it. Right? Like this opportunity was too good to pass up. It was one of those,
right? This
is never going to fall in my lap again. This is something that is going to, we're definitely going to regret this if this passes us by. So we went forward with it. And I think that past me was a little crazy for pushing through it, but we did it. And we survived. Again, we built it into the business plan. We made sure that our systems were set up to where we could cover our costs for the next year and a half. And then, we slowly rebuilt like so many others, kind of squeaked by for a few years. And then, 21 came around, 22 came around, and we started to get a little more. And then, 23 was a pretty successful year for us. And it feels great for it. Now we're in year 4 of operations. But I feel like, we're finally doing what it's meant to be doing. It's like, it works, right? Like this tour operator thing, it works. And, people want to travel and they want to go see the world, and having an outlet to be able to do that in a way that's, sustainable, responsible, ethical, authentic, all these things that we try to do with Ponte, that's never going to go away. And it's making sure that we come to the table doing the right thing. And then people will meet us there.
Yep. Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm curious, because the business that's already in place going into COVID, a lot of the tour operators and operations had people already booked. And that was one of the biggest challenges was dealing with refunds, rescheduling, all of the questions and uncertainty around all this. Presumably, since you were buying a business that was already in place, you got the pleasure of going through all that, right?
Yeah, I did. And I got really lucky. I did, because I think I got really super lucky because the former owners of the business, there were 2 women, Marta Ravens and Heather Murchison. They were the ones that founded the company. They grew the company. They're the ones that really, you can attribute so much of its success, even now, to them. They stayed on as mentors to me through the entire COVID process. They helped me, navigate the waters of the refunds that we needed to process, to help with the clients that, maybe weren't eligible for refunds and we had to defer. They really went out of their way to help me when they didn't have to. They could have just been like, pandemic, bye, I'm out. But they, they stuck around because obviously this is such a big project that they did. They didn't want to see it fail. And so they've still continued to help me often, as a woman business owner.
That's very cool.
Just
very cool. I've spoken, right. I spoke with one gentleman who quit his job. He was doing some destination management company stuff for a company, and he quit his job right before, and like, I'm going to go out on my own. And he had talked to some people. Yeah, we'll give you some business, whatever. And he's like, I'm going to go out on my own. I think he quit his job in February or whatever, but he had a great approach, because he's like, well, I knew I wasn't going to make money right off the bat anyway. I knew it, so he kind of went into it like, I'm not going to make any money for a while anyway, but he didn't have any refunds to process. He didn't have any business already in place. He's like, I just spent my time working on my product. I already knew the product. I knew that these products weren't going to change that much. He's like, I just spent the time building out the product and the systems and, the website and all that stuff. Just take advantage of the time so that when it does come back. And he said, if I had a bunch of stuff already on my plate, I wouldn't have been able, or if COVID wouldn't have happened, I would have just been jumping in, and I probably never would have done as good of a job building the business as I did. But so
I completely relate to that. I absolutely relate to that, because I feel very similarly that, I feel like I had jumped right in and felt like I just needed to keep turning operations the way they were going, I wouldn't have had the chance to really come down to the basis as to what the business is doing, what we were doing, making connections with all of our network suppliers and getting in touch with all of our clients and really getting to know on a very base fundamental level. And I had that opportunity. We were able to work on the website. We were able to work on these other aspects that really, they lose a lot of attention in the base, in the everyday churn of operations. And so, well, COVID was horrible for the industry in general. I feel like it really gave a lot of us the time to step back and reflect. What are we doing? Are we doing things the right way? How can we do things better so that when we do come back, we can make those changes structurally, either if it's in your company or, in the adventure travel sphere in general. We can come back doing the right thing instead of the profitable thing, if that makes sense. I mean, they're not always the same thing. You know what I mean? No, like, let's do this for the right reasons instead of like just doing it to churn travelers.
Well, it's hard to really make impactful change when you're in the middle of something. It's kind of like, I'm thinking of the analogy of trying to learn how to swim, in rough seas. Someone throws you over the side of the boat. You've got one objective, is to keep my head above water and survive, not to learn how to swim. You don't have time to learn how to swim. So sometimes, that kind of slow down to speed up type of thing that, life gives us every once in a while an opportunity to do that. Even if we don't appreciate it at the time, we're like, this sucks. Things were good. I was making money. Yeah. But okay, now I got to stop and reevaluate things. But also something else you touched on, you mentioned, I thought it was brilliant. In Colombia, you guys were really good about taking advantage of the opportunities to travel during the entire time you were there. So that when this all happened and you only had 3 months left and you weren't able to go do all that stuff, you're like, well, we had already been purposeful about doing things and experiencing things. And what that is, what your story of that is exactly what hit pretty much everybody in the world at the same time, was this realization that, oh crap, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. If we're going to do things, we should do them now. Because, it's dark, but there's a lot of people that were planning to retire right around that time, or people that were like, okay, in 2020, that's when I'm going to go on my round the world trip. And they worked until they were 75 or whatever. And some of them didn't have the chance. Some of them weren't able to hold on. Your business was able to hold on. You were able to, create some wonderful things that are really benefiting you and your clients now. But life, I think everybody in the adventure travel, or not just adventure travel, just in life in general, is just kind of reevaluated things. I wouldn't be doing what I was, I was selling real estate when this all started, and that got really weird. And all of a sudden we were doing it remotely. And then I was given the opportunity to do remote, appointment setting for my real estate team. And I'm like, wow, I can do that from anywhere, and I don't know that I would be where I'm at if it hadn't been, for that. Yeah, exactly. And then I realized I still didn't like real estate. So now I've got a podcast and I'm doing travel stuff again. Perfect. Thank goodness. But yeah, so things, it's tough because obviously there's a lot of people that did not get as much benefit out of it. I hate to even use the word benefit tied to that because it was horrible. It sucked. It was a really bad thing.
That's we kind of have to view it on two sides, right? Like, yes, it was advantageous for these reasons, but obviously it was to the world in general. Mm-hmm. I feel like all we can do though is just kind of adjust, adapt, flex. I feel like we've all done that obviously in our personal lives. But professionally, if we've wanted to survive, we needed to flex and we needed to find other ways to do what we were doing. Travel was one of those things that there's always going to be a need for it. There's always going to be a demand for it. That was kind of our mantra going through it, even on the really, really hard days of what have we done? It's like, travel's going to come back. There's like almost nothing that's going to keep travel from coming back. We just had to get there. We just had to get another day.
And I suspect just listening to you, and I'm able to see you on the screen here, I don't think this is all business for you. I don't think this is I'm guessing you chose this type of business as opposed to a laundromat somewhere or a real estate firm or,
Oh,
other things.
absolutely.
I think there's something to it a lot more than just the, can we make money doing this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said from the beginning, like it wasn't about the investment. It wasn't about the business. It was about, travel planning and having something in the travel industry, in the travel sphere that's one thing that I could see myself doing day after day after day and not get tired of
Right.
it. And I can, like,
Yeah.
I will sit down and I will get into a trip and I won't come up for a breath for a long time and I won't get tired of it. And so it just really fits. I mean, it's ever since I was young, right? Since those early days, it's always been a need to go see what else is out there, to go explore these little cultures, and to see what I don't know. And I feel like it's one of these things. Travel is one of these amazing things that the more you do it, the more you realize that there's left to be done.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense? Like the more you go, the more you realize you're never going to know all the other tiny little details and aspects. Like there's always going to be so much more to see. And some people could look at that as a depressing thing, right? Like, oh, well, I'm never going to get to all the different. I feel that it's an amazing thing that there is so much in the world, that there's so many these little microcultures that I'm never going to get the chance to experience, but they exist and they thrive and they've been thriving for thousands of years and they've developed, right? And there are humans attached to those microcultures and they have entire lives that I'm never going to have any contact with. And it's fascinating to me. It's like reading in that way, right? Like the more you read, the more you realize you're never going to get to read.
Or it's that like, I don't know what I don't know until I start to learn. And then I realize I don't know more than I didn't know. And it's this weird thing. Like I named the podcast Big World Made Small, because in some sense it was like, I just want to bring people together. I want to encourage people to go out and learn and have it not seem so overwhelming. But at the same time, what you just said is true. It's like the more I travel, the more I'm like, oh, like I created the podcast. I was in Southeast Asia, my first trip to Southeast Asia, and it always seemed so far away. And I thought I'm making the big world feel smaller by traveling. But then like when I came back to, South America, I'm like, but I didn't go to, any number of places. I didn't go to Myanmar. I didn't make it to India. I didn't go to Bangladesh. And it's like, that's
the beauty of it. You don't have to, right? You don't have to have it as a checklist. Like you don't have to have travel and have the world as I didn't experience it, so it's a lack on my part, right? It's like I got to go experience the things that I did at the quality that I did, right? Like rather than just saying boom, 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 we're going to get all these things off just to see them. It's like I got to really experience this one culture that's in a really deep way, in a really slow, intimate way. That is enriching to my life. And just to know that there are so many more of those out there. I don't know, that's energizing. I mean, that brings me energy.
I would agree because frankly, well, you and I probably both know some people that have been to almost all countries or maybe even all of them. And it's like, okay, on one sense, that's cool because they have to have had experiences along the way, but they couldn't have experienced all of it. Number one. Number two is it's like, I like knowing that there's more places to see. I'm a realist. I'm not going to get to see all of them. But I sure like the idea that they exist because maybe I'll, as long as there's more places to see and experience, not to check off the list. I couldn't care less about number of countries, but, if tomorrow morning I woke up and just somehow was able to download every cultural experience that's available on the planet, I'd be like, oh man, how boring. Like what am I going to do the next day?
Right.
I don't want to know it all. I don't want to see it all. It's like, I love dreaming about where to go next. Even if I never make it, I'm on my phone all the time looking at flights on Kayak or Airbnb in Armenia or Georgia. And I don't know if I'll ever make it, but man, I sure get excited about the fact that I could, I'm fortunate enough to have the physical health and the resources to go do stuff. Maybe not on the same level as some of your clients are doing. I'm more likely to, with my one little suitcase and staying in a crappy Airbnb somewhere, but I'll enjoy it just as much. But anyway, so what's new and exciting on the horizon for you?
What is new and exciting? I think that I feel like I'm still kind of in the rebuilding stage. And I know that that's, now we're 4 years past COVID, not even, but, a few years past COVID. I honestly don't even know if we're going to be out of a rebuilding stage. I feel like the world we're in right now is so, it's different enough from pre-COVID that it's always going to be different, right? Like there's always going to be new changing things that we're dealing with in travel, pandemics and natural disasters and political incidents, and you name it. There's always going to be something that's going to be changing the way that the industry works. I think for as far as what's new for us, I hope you can have this little pause here. I'm really trying to think of something.
No, that's, and I maybe there's so much exciting new stuff that it's hard to put your finger on one. I get that, because you got something. All right. What do you got?
Yeah. Something that's really exciting that I think that I'm going to lean heavier into in terms of what we do at Ponte, is, we do offer worldwide destinations, and that's great. We always have, I think that the first destination that Ponte was really focused in was India. Right? Just bloomed out of that. But based off of my experience in Colombia and based off of a few recent trips that I've taken to that area, and I was in Peru in December and in Ecuador just last month in May, it really solidified my love for the North Andes region. Just feel like everywhere you travel, you leave a piece to your heart, but that corner of South America is just, it becomes so special to my heart. That it's definitely a region that I'm going to be leaning heavier into in the next few months, next couple of years, I think. Really developing more product there, more itineraries there. I want to show just the depth of that region. There's so much more than the major sites that it's a place for culinary. Colombia is a culinary destination. Colombia is a family destination. Colombia has these Ecuador and Peru too, but it has all their really wonderful things to it. But I think get hidden by, it gets hidden by its history.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, when you asked, how did your family feel about you moving to Colombia? That gets wrapped up in it too. I feel like even you tell somebody that you live in Colombia, or you were there with 2 young children, like, oh my gosh, how was that? Were you safe? Yes, you're absolutely safe. It's this stigma that they're trying to overcome constantly. And I think one of the things that's driving not only my own efforts with what we're doing now, it's seeing so many of the young tour operators in Colombia trying to share their country in a way that changes that narrative. And I'm sure you see it too, right? You see that the successful tourism industry is being run by a younger generation. They're the ones that love their country so much. They love their culture. They love everything about Colombia, that they want to share it with the world, but they're met with these stigmas, with this horrible history that they have. And that's all that people see. And to be able to change that, to accept it. Yes, this happened, but that it's a thing in the past. And, we're moving forward, and we have this amazing biodiversity. We have this amazing agrodiversity, culture diversity, these wonderful natural sites that you can't have anywhere else in the world. And they're doing it so proactively, just out of the love of their country. It was really beautiful to witness, and it's something that it makes me want to be a much heavier Colombia supporter because of it.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, go to Colombia and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that's.
You're gonna.
and you're absolutely right. And the thing is, like, if you haven't been to Colombia, you can hear us saying this. Hopefully, you hear the passion in the voice. If you were looking at Mary's face right now, you would see it and you'd feel it. And I get it. Like, I grew up, I'm probably a little older than you are, Mary. I mean, when I was growing up in high school, that's what was on the news, was bad stuff happening in Colombia. It's kind of like, somebody wanting to go to Afghanistan or something, and it's just like, well, why would I want to go there? But the truth is, almost every day I look around me and I think, oh my goodness, there are so many people who will never experience this because of old playing stories or images in their head of things that they'd heard There's some political reasons. I mentioned the State Department warning. I'm not knocking the State Department, but but you know what? I've been a lot of places where the state, I lived in Belize for a while, and the State Department warning wasn't that excited about going to Belize either. So set that stuff aside, quit watching the news, because you're never going to see the good stuff on these. You're not going to see.
But also, take it with a grain of salt.
Well, yeah, just like, but it's hard if you haven't traveled outside the country, and it's really hard. But I think Colombia's, I've experienced a lot of great places in South America, spent time, Venezuela, Africa, some other places before I ever came to Colombia. But Colombia is the one where it really challenged my own beliefs, my own stories and images in my head of what I was going to experience. And when I got here, it was like, oh yeah, this is not like what my parents were telling me it was going to be like, everything was just like, wow, I'm so happy I came here and I got to see it for myself. Are there difficult things that happen here? Yes. There's difficult things that happen in St. Louis, Missouri, or Chicago, Illinois, or Oakland, California, or, Paris, France, or any of the places. But the trade-offs here are so high, I shouldn't say this. Anybody that's in St. Louis, disregard this, stop listening for a second. I don't see a whole lot of benefits to going to St. Louis, but I see, there are some risks there. There's some challenges and issues there. There's not much in St. Louis particularly that would draw my attention, except for maybe some barbecue. But, with a place like Colombia, and probably a lot of places in the world, there's so many amazing things that are happening that it makes it a little easier to kind of accept, that there is a certain level of risk anytime you travel. But when you're here and you get on the bus and you look totally different than everybody else on the bus, and you're looking at your phone, trying to figure out where you can get off so you can walk to the metro station, and people will just look at you. What are you looking for? Can I help you? And then, the last time I was in a situation recently, and by the time I got off the bus, there were 6 or 7 people trying to give me directions on, okay, get off here, walk down this way, boom, boom, boom. And they're all using their own set of directions, because Colombians have their own way of doing things. And my Spanish can barely manage one person at a time. But I got off feeling like, man, I'm so cared for and so looked after. And this is white middle-aged guy in Medellin, Colombia, where some people might have stories about what's a white middle-aged guy doing in Medellin, Colombia. And these people were just so incredibly welcoming. And it's just like almost every day. I left a few, when I first got here, I left a few coins on a table at a coffee shop. And the woman chased me out on the street to tell me I left my money, and I'm like, that's a tip. Isn't that what you do? And I've had people, I have a receipt hanging out of my back pocket, and people on the metro or wherever will stop me and point at it and say, hey, you've got something hanging out of your pocket. They're not trying to, there's pickpocketing everywhere, but I haven't experienced it. And I've experienced so much of the opposite that even at this point, even if I did get pickpocketed or probably even robbed, I would see it as an anomaly, not that's one person who's having a problem right now. But everybody else has just been so sweet and wonderful. And so come to Colombia, and you and I need to probably figure out some ways to collaborate on that as well, because obviously I'm very excited about it. And I think it's great that you're gonna do more stuff down here. So So stay tuned for more Colombia content from here. I'm excited for that. We've discussed a lot of things. When you expand into Colombia, we'll do another episode to just talk about that. But as far as this episode, is there anything I forgot to ask you, should have asked you, or anything that you want to make sure that our listeners know about you, your views on life, anything that I missed that we should discuss before we wrap up?
We kind of touched on it earlier, but I always, when people always ask me for travel advice, the first thing I always say is, just go. Don't try to find the reasons why you shouldn't go. Just go. Just, make it work, because you're not going to regret going. You're not going to regret the actual experiences that you have when you go. You're going to gain so much from going, and especially if you have kids. I think if you take your kids traveling and you take them to a new place, a lot of people think that, they're not going to get anything from it. They're too young. They're not going to remember. But it's so much more than the sights that they're going to see and the facts that they're going to remember. Kids pick up on problem solving. They pick up on being in a different, language environment. They pick up on other food. They pick up on all these little cues that, if you make it a habit enough, then they begin to do that themselves and they become more comfortable in it themselves. So, I feel like if you're ever on the fence about going somewhere, just go. It's going to be an incredible transformational experience. Just go.
There's nothing I can't add to that at all. Thank you. That's a perfect way to end the conversation. Just go. So thank you. And we've got your website in the show notes. And, the whole point of this is to help people connect with you as a person. And if they're inspired by your message and they think they might want to check out what Ponte's doing, then I trust they'll click the link. I would encourage them to very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
This is not my first conversation with you, Mary, and I'm inspired by what you're doing and excited about it. And it's great to have another veteran working in the travel business, because that's something I honestly don't see very often, and we didn't really touch on it too much.
But you mentioned it earlier, and that is, again, one of those things that whenever I mention it as my back, well, I'm a traveler, and I mentioned that, and they're like, what? That's not a thing people in the travel industry do very often.
Yeah, but it makes sense. I mean, I can create a few different stories for why that is, but I think that people that are willing to, go travel around, serve, whatever, I don't know. It worked for me, worked for you. So here we are. So thanks for being here. Appreciate you. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks so much, Jason. It's been great. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.